This is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to explain why you don't want a Land Rover Defender. I'm not talking about the new Land Rover Defender. You might want one of those. It's pretty good. I have one. It's great. I love it. But the old Defender, you definitely do not want one of those, despite what you might think. Even though they look so cool, I think you don't want one. And today I'm going to explain why I think that and what I mean. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. We've had some fantastic sales recently on Cars and Bids, including this 2002 Porsche 911, which sold for just under $30,000, this gorgeous BMW M4 with around 2,000 miles that sold for $60,000, and this fantastic Nissan 300ZX Turbo, which brought $35,000. If you're looking to sell your cool car from the modern era, the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to do it. You'll get your auction listed quickly and you'll get the most interest and views in your car. And if you're looking to buy a cool car from the modern era, check out Cars and Bids with daily auctions and great selection at carsandbids.com. Okay, so let me get started with a little background. I have this old Land Rover Defender. It's not that old, it's a 1997 model, but you know, the design came from the 60s. So it feels old and it looks kind of vintage. And vintage SUVs are really hot right now. It's like the hottest segment of the collector car market. It's what everybody is gravitating towards. And so people see me driving this old Land Rover Defender, and I'm approached constantly, like every day that I drive it, when people say, hey, I want that. Hey, where did you get that? Hey, what do those cost? Hey, are you interested in selling yours? You know, I really want one of those. Cool Defender. Whoa, this is so neat, man. Yo, man, I love this thing. Well, can I get one? and I'm constantly being approached. And I don't want to deter people from owning cool cars like that, but I think that the expectation will not match the reality for the vast majority of people who want one of these just because they think it looks cool. And so today I'm going to explain why you probably don't actually want an old Land Rover Defender, even if you think you do. Okay, so the reasons you don't want one. And by the way, it's not just, I have the North American spec Land Rover Defender, which was sold here for a few model years in the 90s, but it's not just those that are really hot right now. People are importing Defenders like crazy from Europe, and they're flipping them for huge profits because the demand from Americans is just so hot. Like I said, vintage SUVs is hot, and that look, that like square, cool Defender look is just really in right now. Everybody seems to want it. And so these Defenders are just, people, Americans in particular right now, cannot seem to get enough of these Defenders. So why don't you want one? The basic reason I always tell people when they approach me why they don't want a Land Rover Defender is it kind of sucks. Like, it is not good to drive. It is incredibly rough. The suspension is tremendously rough over bumps. It is not comfortable at all. It's very loud. You hear the engine, the suspension, the tires, road noise, wind noise, everything. You can't hear that well inside it. The rear passengers are always telling me that they can't hear what's being said in the front, and we're talking about a distance of this. You know? It's just like water always gets in. Mine's a soft top, but even if you have the full soft top on, water will leak in when it's raining. It just isn't like a great driving experience. And what often I find is that people see the Land Rover badge and they own, the kind of people who like want to buy a Defender because it looks cool, they own like a new Range Rover or like a new Discovery. And they'll come up and say, oh, this is a Land Rover, but it looks like an old Jeep. And so I bet it drives like a Land Rover, but it has the look of an old Jeep. And what I want to tell people is, no, it has the look of an old Jeep, but it drives worse than an old Jeep. Actually, it drives like a tractor. And so it's actually worse than what you're thinking. I think people they see the Land Rover badge and they think this is some premium offering that will, you know, eradicate the flaws of the old Jeep and still provide you with this Land Rover experience. And that ain't true. At the end of the day, it's just an old truck and it drives like what it is, an old truck. Lots of rattles, lots of bumps. And I know people who have bought these old Defenders and they have spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to remove that trucky feel from it. People will wrap the interior in beautiful quilted leather. They'll put in a touch screen. They'll change out the seats and make them nicer. They'll put in this sound deadening material called Dynamat to try to get rid of all the road noise. They'll change the suspension, the tires. They'll try to improve everything in the ultimate pursuit of just making it nice. And the truth is, you can't. There's nothing you can throw at a Land Rover Defender that will make it a good experience. Like, it just isn't gonna happen. At the end of the day, it's an old truck. It was designed to be an old truck, and there's only so much you can do to change that. It still feels like an old truck even after you some people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on like resto modded ones with Chevy V8s and nice automatic transmissions. It still drives like a squeaky, rattly, rough and tumble old Defender. And then there's the next issue that makes, I think, a lot of people should be avoiding Defenders. That would be the reliability. When I bought my Defender, I was kind of terrified about the reliability issue. And the truth is, it's actually been better than I expected, but it hasn't been great. For one thing, it has stranded me twice. The front drive shaft snapped at one point, and I had to get it towed. And also, at one point, the throttle cable like broke, and I had to get it back in place with a keychain on the side of the road. And so I drove around with a keychain holding the throttle cable in place until I could get it to a mechanic. And that sort of stuff happens when you own a Land Rover Defender. Like I said, mine's been better than I thought, but it hasn't been great. And this is another thing I always tell people. You have to kind of be an enthusiast to own one of these in terms of the upkeep and the difficulty of ownership that's required. Like, this isn't gonna be your new Range Rover where, yeah, Land Rovers are so unreliable, but really a new one, you take it to the dealer twice a year like any other car, you don't really have a lot of problems. The Defender is not gonna be like that. An old Land Rover is an old vehicle. You gotta keep on top of everything. You have to constantly be servicing it, checking out stuff, making sure that everything is good. It has a lot of old stuff that's gonna be cracking, breaking, aging, drying out, snapping, and parts aren't always easy to find. You get a call from your mechanic sometimes and say, hey, we don't have this. And someone who's wealthy and who's used to just having stuff is like, what are you talking about? But that's a reality with these cars. So you have to be ready to maintain it. And frankly, you have to be ready for it to strand you. That might happen. And those are the kind of things that I think is more of an enthusiast thing rather than a like, oh, it looks cool, I want it kind of thing. And frankly, I think that's a big point to remember here. If you're an enthusiast, this sort of thing comes with the territory. I bought mine knowing full well that this sort of thing would happen. And what would happen from a reliability standpoint. But if you're a regular person who just thinks it looks cool and you want one, I suspect part of the fun will wear off very quickly once you realize sort of the level of attention and neediness that it requires. And that sort of stuff really requires someone who like loves it and wants it as an enthusiast thing, and not just someone who wants it because it looks cool. Well, it's gonna start to wear off if it strands you and if it requires a lot of upkeep and cost to keep running. And that's the third big issue I tell people why you maybe don't want a Defender. The general cost of them. I paid $63,000 for my Defender like 4 years ago. And mine is a North American spec Land Rover Defender. Like I said, they were imported to North America officially for a few years in the 90s, and they carry a massive premium over the foreign privately imported ones for a bunch of reasons, which I actually explained in a video a couple years ago. I'm gonna link that in the description below, so you can kind of see the differences between the Defenders. But 63 grand for my truck to buy it. I think it's now worth maybe 80 to 85 based on where the market is. Things have gotten totally crazy with the NAS Defender market. It's just completely out of hand. And so not only is it unreliable and you have to pay to keep it going, but there's a price of admission that is increasingly becoming unaffordable for a lot of people. And even on the imported truck, if you don't get an NAS truck, the imported ones are also getting pretty expensive. I'm starting to see some crazy sales because the NASs have gotten so valuable that more and more people are now kind of congregating around the imported ones, and they're valuable. So when you think about it, not only do you have to pay to keep it going, but you got to pay to buy it, which is a lot. And it's a lot of money to spend, especially when you consider what else you need to put up with in order to use it from like a drivability perspective and from like a general upkeep and maintenance perspective. So there you go. You don't really want an old Land Rover Defender. Now, if you have listened to all of this, all of these caveats and drawbacks of owning a Defender, and the idea of one still appeals to you, then maybe you do want an old Land Rover Defender. Maybe you're the type of enthusiast that would benefit greatly from this vehicle if you know all of this stuff is a reality when you're going into it. But this video is important for me to do because I'm going to send it to everyone who emails me or reaches out or sends me a text message saying, hey, I want an old Defender. I'm going to send them this video and say, this is maybe why you don't. Yes, it can be a lot of fun. I love the trucky driving experience, frankly, and I love the top-down, roof-off enjoyment, and it's way more unique and more fun and frankly more capable than like a Jeep. But I'm also an enthusiast, and I don't think that putting up with some of this stuff is a bad thing in order to have the fun. But I suspect that isn't true for everybody. Some people who just like how it looks, thinks it's cool, you might be in for something when you actually get one. But maybe now people like that know a little bit more about what the Land Rover Defender experience will really be like.